imagine if you were to be a client of a doctor and you are expecting an information particular to what you should eat and what you should not eat. Would you expect a diet chart, or would you expect a discussion on
Discussion, ma'am.
it, right? So if you ask me personally, I would not recommend only a diet chart to be given. So a diet chart is well prepared only when it is explained. It cannot only be prepared well and handed over to your clients, but it should be explained well. So there is no, I do not follow any particular method of, preparing a diet chart per se, but I would rather sit and explain what is the importance of food. What do you learn about food in naturopathy? So I think not just in naturopathic principles, but in terms of yoga, what is the basic principle behind, your nutrition and your food? So I think you explain that, you pretty much explain everything about diet to a patient. I don't think so there be a requirement for you to sit and prepare a diet chart as such. If you ask me, my recommendation, I would not give my clients a diet chart at all, because that'll be thrown somewhere. It'll be on a tabletop, lying down, not being used in any way. But what matters is whether you've explained properly about what you should eat, why you should eat it, how you should eat it. Yoga talks not only about the Satvika Ahara, but it also talks about mindful eating. It talks about mindful preparation. So I think these are the aspects that you should throw light on, rather than throwing light on so much amount of carbs and so much amount of proteins, and maybe some exotic fruits that have good nutrients in them and they'll help in many different ways. That will not make your intervention or intervention in terms of diet and nutrition complete. So I would say start from your core. Instead of relying only on a diet chart, sit and talk to your clients about uh, what is food and why it is important, what makes a difference. Is if they understand the importance of eating and preparing food in the right way. So that is more important, I believe.
Ma'am, one more.
Yes. Yeah, please go ahead. I think your voice, you've muted yourselves.
How can the poor people avoid adulterated food and afford to buy organic food and being automatically excluded for better quality nutrition?
Good question again. But if you ask me, I think it's the rich people who are getting exposed to unorganic processed foods rather than the poor ones. Poor ones maybe are not aware of the importance, but they are not introduced itself to all of these processed foods. Okay. So they, in their natural habitat, majority of them are consuming pretty much natural foods, I must say. But what they're not aware of is certain important micronutrients that they have to include. Many of them will be anemic and things like that. It's probably not because of the nutritive value, it could also be because of other factors that are influencing them in terms of food. Okay. So I don't think so poor people, uh, rich people can afford organic, but rich people probably like what is looking very fancy and processed. I'm not judging rich and poor here, but that was the basis of the question you asked. How can a poor guy buy organic foods? Because it is expensive. Why organic foods have become expensive is because the awareness on that is, marketing strategies on that, you people are being fooled by what we are supposed to do. We are being fooled saying that organic is what you should eat and things like that. So I think you should understand the marketing strategy here, how advertisements screw with our so-called intellect and mint money out of us. So I think poor people are safe and sound. They're doing pretty well with their food, if you ask me.
Thank you, ma'am.
I myself come, my native is not like a very well-off urbanized area. What unfortunately a lot of people do there is they try to follow rich people and get themselves into, or they try to follow the urbanized population, eat fancy food, and they're trying to otherwise spoil their health. But before, I think they were all involved in preparing, in growing, in preparing and eating and consuming healthy foods rather than the urbanized population.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. I hope I've answered your questions.
Yes, ma'am.
Hello, ma'am.
Yes. Hi. Hello. Please.
Ma'am, I am Nehal Satya from Moraji Desai Institute of Naturopathy and Yogic Science. I am a fourth year student and I had like to ask you about pulse and tongue diagnosis because nowadays this is not very much practiced, but since it is the ancient practicing technique and for diagnosis as well, so please guide us and please suggest us some books, also authentic books, so that we can learn about it. Thank you, ma'am.
Okay. So diagnostics in terms of traditional Chinese medicine is a very vast subject. It requires a lot of expertise. You have to experience looking into 100 different tongues of your clients. Pulse diagnosis itself is a very vast subject. So if you're expecting me to teach you about tongue diagnosis and pulse diagnosis here in the webinar, I don't think so. It's the apt time because it itself require a lot of time for me to talk about it. And to be very frank, I'm not the person you should talk about tongue and pulse diagnosis because I'm not an expert in it. But definitely books are available there. In fact, you should from your colleges or like how you're doing a virtual platform with us, you should also try and bring in experts in the field who can talk to you about basics of diagnostics. One very good book that I would suggest is of Giovanni Maziosa. TCM Diagnostics is one traditional Chinese medicine book that he has written, I think 6 or 7 books. Giovanni Maziosa. I think all of his books are worth reading. They're very expensive. If you're lucky, if you can get it online. But yeah, I think his books is what I would recommend for pulse and tongue diagnosis. And I would recommend, instead of asking me, to be very frank, ask another expert who's been practicing TCM for a long time. Even in our BNY's population, there are a lot of people who are practicing TCM in their clinical practice. You should request your faculty to arrange for a session with them, so that you can get right amount of knowledge instead of me sitting here and giving you bits and pieces of what I know about tongue and pulse diagnosis.
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Good evening, ma'am.
Good evening.
I'm from Astrology, Naturopathy, and Yogic Sciences. I'm an internship student. I would like to ask you how much research.
I'm sorry, your voice is breaking.
I'm audible.
Yeah, you are now. Please tell. Why don't you do one thing?
As Sage Swat.
Why don't you do one thing? Why don't you put your question in the chat box?
Yeah, fine.
Okay. So the question is how yamas and niyamas are important in our clinical practice. So can you please name the yamas and niyamas for me?
Ahimsa, Satya, Asteya, Brahmacharya, Aparigraha, Yamaha.
Okay. So talk about in general what are yamas. They are the uh, the moral disciplines that you follow, right? They are the morals or value systems that you are expected to follow. Ahimsa. In terms of ahimsa, it is not only about violence to another living organisms. It could be violence in terms of your speech, in terms of your thoughts, in terms of your actions. How you violating your own mind, your own thought process, your own actions can also cause a lot of impact on your health. Also, another important factor about ahimsa is about a lot of non-vegetarians might not agree with me, but ahimsa directly or very straightforwardly says that you're not supposed to practice non-vegetarian food habits or using animal products, using leather products. Um, you name any sort of exploitation that you're doing right now. It could be artificial insemination, how artificial insemination and injection of hormones creating violence in the cattle are affecting your health, right? So these are some of the philosophical aspects that are explained by Patanjali, yamas and niyamas. You will have to relate. I've given one example on ahimsa. You will have to relate them in terms of your daily practices. Naturopathy talks about lifestyle. So in your lifestyle, if you are violating the nature principles, say satya, if you're not it's not just about lies, or it's just not about you not lying to somebody else, but are you truthful? Satya is not equivalent to asatya. Satya talks about whether are you truthful to what you are supposed to do for your are you truthful about your thoughts, your actions? So all of these are the examples that I'm giving about ahimsa and satya, but I think these explain the lifestyle, describe the lifestyle of an individual very beautifully. And if as a naturopath and a yoga doctor you have to explain or you have to describe about uh, a person's lifestyle, help in lifestyle modification, because that's what we are good at. We are good at helping people understand about lifestyle and help them modify. These are the aspects you should start with, right? So that is how you should, I think, correlate and sit and write about what are the day-to-day activities that involve these principles, and then you can start explaining. If you give me, if you want me to answer in terms of say say diabetes, okay, it's one of the most common uh, metabolic disease that we all come across as naturopathy and yoga doctors, right? I think there are a lot of papers also published in yoga. So if you want me to explain in for diabetes, so ahimsa, satya, asteya, brahmacharya, aparigraha, ahimsa, non-violence. How can you correlate non-violence in diabetes? Can you give me can you think of some example? Can you think of some relation? non-violence in terms of your own thought process can create a lot of stress within you, creating further psychosomatic issues, low-grade inflammation, and aggravating the disease. In terms of diet, eating a lot of non-vegetarian food, which you're not designed to consume, can again create a lot of ill health in terms of pathologically low grade inflammation and further process, right? So that way, I think you should sit and understand logically how can you interpret yamas and niyamas for a clinical practice.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Good
I
evening,
hope
ma'am.
I'm answering your questions. If not, please, you can, please ask your question.
Good evening, ma'am. My name Bhakti Tandel. I am from 4th year from Morarji Desai Institute of Naturopathy and Yogic Science. My question is, what is the relationship between pain and nadi according to authentic test?
What is the relationship between
Pain and nadi.
pain, pain?
Pain.
Okay. Pain in terms of, you're talking about pain, no? PAIN, pain?
Huh.
Pain and nadis. Okay. What is the relationship between pain and nadis? Okay. How do you want me to relate it? Okay. See, if you consider pain as one of the first inflammatory sign, which could also be a signal from the body telling you that there's something that's not going right. It could be some amount of inflammation happening. It could be some amount of some sort of a disorder in the usual process of homeostasis in the body. If that's one of the signal that body is giving you, it gives you in terms of neural signals, right? Neural signals, and further there's vascular activity going on, there's chemical activity going on. So modern science wise, pain is a inflammatory reaction. So in terms of nadis, traditional systems says nadis are the energy channels. So again, some issues with the flow of the energy, it could be the blockage, it could be the increase energy flow, decrease energy flow, wrong direction, whatever it is. Again, there's some sort of a signal that the body gives you. This is the only thing that I can correlate. Apabhaya, is there any other way that you can relate nadis and pain? I don't think so. He's there. I think
He's
not
there
there.
in the meeting. He's there.
Okay. If anybody else has an answer for this, even I would be glad to know. That was the only way that I could think of pain and nadis. No other explanation that I can think of at this point of time. Anybody else would want to throw some light on your understanding of nadis and pain and relate it together?
Ma'am, maybe we can relate it with stagnation, congestion, so that because of that also pain is one of the signal that we get.
Yeah, like I said, it could be any issue with the flow of energy in the nadis that is giving a signal in terms of pain. modern science wise, it is an inflammatory reaction to any disorder of the usual process that needs to happen, right? So I think we are on the same lines.
I think actually, ma'am, improper lifestyle is also one of the cause for the pain. No?
Yes, right. So how do you pain is a body's way of telling you that there is some discomfort happening here, some amount of disturbance happening in the body. See if you can correct it. That's one of the signals that the body gives you. The reason can be anything, acute, chronic. It could just be if I hit my hand somewhere, that could also cause a little bit of pain. So reason behind it is multiple. There are variety of reasons behind it. So in terms of nadis, there's probably some amount of obstruction in the energy flow, and that is why the body is trying to tell you that there's obstruction in terms of pain. I can only think of these explanations.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Hello, ma'am.
Yes, hello.
I'm Aisha. I'm
Hi,
studying in
Aisha.
fourth year, Government Nature Cure and Yoga Medical College, Mysore. Ma'am, my question is, as naturopathy is emerging, the same way the competitors are also increasing. The subjects that we are studying are the degree what they are pursuing, like the nutritionists, may it be physiotherapist, acupuncturist. There is no doubt that they learn in depth. But the thing is, what in future they come forward and oppose being bias graduates, assuming their subjects as their power.
Okay. You're talking about future. I think that's already happening. They're already emerging with their courses, and they are already claiming their degrees and their stand in the society in terms of healthcare.
How do we answer?
But see, for example, there's one vendor with one variety of mango, another vendor with the same variety of mango. How will you choose which mango you would buy? If there are two brands of cloths, if there's something that you want to buy, what is it that you look for?
Variety.
Okay, you go to a mall, there are variety of cloths. What do you look for?
The best.
How do you call something best? By looking into the quality of it?
Yeah.
Right? So you as a naturopathy doctor, you have an additional very important aspect of medicine that comes into your curriculum, right? So you as a naturopathy doctor, how can you improvise upon your quality of service that you provide? See, they are I'm not saying that we should compete with a physiotherapist. We should compete with an acupuncturist. An acupuncturist knows in and out about acupuncture. A physiotherapist probably knows in and out of physiotherapy. You as a doctor, you are introduced to all of these subjects. So you are supposed to know everything about these topics, right? So choose what you are interested in. Say if you're interested in acupuncture, go in depth, improvise on your quality. See what in terms of therapy and medical points you can add to improve your service. What extra can you add is what you have to look. See, in this scenario, there's no point in sitting and cribbing about. There's so many group of people who are coming. Their quacks are coming. These physiotherapists are emerging. Acupuncture people are emerging. All that is there. What are you doing about it? Are you doing your best? Are you trying to improve the quality of service that you can provide as a doctor to your maximum? Is what you have to look at. Okay. the market will have variety of things. People will choose which has the best quality in it. So if you want people to come to you as a doctor, you worry about and you work about your quality rather than thinking about what others are doing in the system. You there's nothing you can do or I can do sitting here about courses in physiotherapy, and they are doing their bit. I don't think so we should complain about it. We should in fact worry and think about our own quality, our own expertise, and give. And you have see, look at your benefits. You can talk from a medical perspective, you can talk from scientific perspective. A lot of people cannot talk science, you can talk science. So update yourselves in terms of science, read research papers, get into research activities. So that will help you build your foundation. It'll help you talk scientifically better. And also when you see patients, clinically observe what is happening. So I think you should worry about and you should give importance to your quality rather than, it's not just you, I think I'm talking for the entire BNYS community. We should stop worrying about what others are doing, but we should rather improvise on the quality that we have to provide.
Yeah, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. That's it.
Hello, ma'am.
Hello.
It's Pooja. I am a BNYS fourth year student, and my question is, how much detailed knowledge of pharmacology is needed for BNYS, as patient who will come to us, surely they had undergone some allopathic medicines. So, what is the role of us as a naturopath about these medicines? Please give me some insight as per your experience.
See, any amount of knowledge on pharmacology is not bad, but having said that, I'm not saying that you should, read as much as any pharmacologist does. No, what you should understand is certain basic medications, how do they work? Pain medications, what is the mechanism, what is the pharmacokinetics behind the drugs that they are giving? Certain common drugs that usually people like say Pandy, aspirin, things like that, how do they work and what are the effects of it? In fact, even if you're not aware of a lot of drugs that are being given, it's okay. It's okay to go back and refer and see why they are given. Okay. We as naturopathy doctors, we may not have to, we are not in fact allowed to, prescribe any medications. So you should be aware of certain basic medications that people usually are given for their metabolic diseases, for certain psychological disorders. You should also know that because you're a naturopath and you need not have to prescribe this one, doesn't mean medicines, doesn't mean that you can stop all of their medications. So there are a lot of people who do that. You are on naturopathic treatment, stop your medications, we'll take care of it. We'll take care of your sugar levels, we'll take care of your hypertension, don't worry about it and stop your medications. No. Understand, sit and read about how they work and how can you integrate better rather than worrying too much about all the, I in my personal practice, I am a very weak student for pharmacology, and but still I've survived well off in my profession in an allopathy hospital itself, in cancer hospital itself, with my least knowledge of pharmacology. What you should know is some basic drugs, how do they work, and you should know some basic rules of how to stop or you should not stop, and when to stop, when not to stop, when should you advise your patient to take a consult allopath and take a medicine, when you should know when you cannot do anything about the disease that they're going through. That I think you should know. I think that pretty much is enough in terms of pharmacology.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Good evening, ma'am.
Good evening.
Ma'am, my name is Jaya Rai from first year BNYS.
Uh-huh.
I am from Siddharthi College of Naturopathy and Yogic Science. My
Mm-hmm.
question is, I always seen cataract and migraine in contraindication. So can we cure it with naturopathy treatment?
In contraindication means what is it that you're meaning?
Ma'am, like इसे चक्रासन में नहीं करना चाहिए एंड थ्राटका भी उसमें कैटरेक्ट में नहीं करना चाहिए तो क्या हम इसे नेचुरोपैथी ट्रीटमेंट से ठीक नहीं कर सकते?
Okay. See, here I think you are getting into a reductionist approach where a person comes to you with migraine. These are the set of asanas that you will give. These are the set of practices or naturopathic treatments that you will give. No, each individual is different. Each person has different causes for migraine. For me, maybe it's my stress. For somebody, maybe it's food. For somebody, it may be some other issues that can be causing migraine. Same in terms of you choosing your treatment should not be with a reductionist approach of uh, migraine, practice chakrasana, or Thrataka, don't do, cataract, don't do Thrataka, migraine, do Thrataka. See where you can bridge in between and give best possible lifestyle modification that is very much scientific. I'm not asking you to do something that's not scientific. From the scientific basis and perspective is what best can you do for these patients. It's don't go with a reductionist approach that disease के लिए ये सारे asanas करवाएंगे. No, even if a person do not have cataract, a migraine patient might not be able to do Trataka without a cataract itself. So you will have to work very smart to give best possible solutions for these conditions. Cataract, I don't know whether you can completely cure. Migraine, I'm pretty much sure that you can give wonderful results.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Any questions in the chat box?
Ma'am,
Yeah.
I'm Subhashini from fourth year BNYS SVSR University.
Yes.
So my question is, can you elaborate and justify the effects of physical laws of nature that we can think of, like in yogasanas, we can think of biomechanics and lever system and all, but what are the physical laws of nature that helps to justify or understand as better hydrotherapy treatments and habits that we follow?
Okay. Give me one law of nature that you want me to explain on. I'll see whether I can do it.
All we see is we talk about bioNC, but we are not much sure how it works. So can you elaborate on that?
Okay, you want me to talk on only hydrotherapy?
Yes, yes.
Okay, okay, okay. So how can you understand the mechanisms of hydrotherapy? There's one very beautiful paper that is published by one of the BNYS doctors itself. I think it's Shreya Didi, if I'm not wrong, or Muvantan sir, if I'm not wrong. Please go through that paper to understand how scientifically can you explain hydrotherapy and how can you bridge that gap between explaining it scientifically and in terms of nature cure philosophy. It's a very nice read for you to go through. Different temperatures is different effect is very much a logical explanation for it's very logical. It will actually not require me to explain on how cold affects your skin or how warm affects your skin, when you should use a cold water application and when warm water application and all that, right? So instead of me sitting and talking about entire hydrotherapy scientifically, it's better if you can sit and read that paper and come back to me if you have more questions. I think that's better. Do you have
Yes.
that paper? I think I'll be able to share that paper. I can do it with. I think I'll share the paper. I'll share it with the organizer
Because
and
there
he'll
are
be able.
some confusion. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Please get back if you have doubts.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
Good evening, ma'am.
Good evening.
Myself, Janhavi. I'm studying 4th year in Alvas College of Naturopathy and Yogic Science. My question is, what is the spiritual well-being mean?
Okay. So, see, spirituality is something that that talks about your purpose of your life, how you can differentiate, or how you can spiritually correlate your entire life in terms of what you're doing. Is it good, bad? It's all about whether you're following your path very satisfyingly. Okay, so spiritual well-being is, it's not only, many a time spiritual well-being is spoken only in end of life care. When somebody is dying, that's when spirituality comes. No, spirituality is about your questions of why you choose certain path. Why did you choose BNYs? What is your purpose as a BNYs doctor? You can also correlate in terms of, in anything that you do. Say for example, you're doing BNYs now, many people might not be very happy with the course and or with the college or with hostels, with your teachers, with the curriculum and things like that. So in terms of all of this chaos in the surrounding, internally and externally, spiritual well-being is, can you maintain your sanity? Can you maintain your peace of mind within, with all of these chaos around? Can you maintain this peace around us? Is what I understand spirituality is. It is basically you completely being in terms with your life, be it good, bad, whatever results may come. Are you okay with it? Are you able to accept it rather than expect multiple things to happen and not achieve any of it, crib about it, worry about it, uh, go into depression with it? No, it's about, can you come in terms with what is happening in your life, personally, you as a doctor, you as a citizen, can you come in terms with your own life? Is what, if you are able to come in terms with everything that happens with you, I think you're spiritually good. Your well-being in terms of spirituality is good. If not, you should be working on it. I don't think so any of us are 100% great in spiritual well-being, right? We all have our own doubts, questions. We all have our own complaints that we have about our life, right? So spiritual well-being is all about how beautifully you accept your life and go about it, rather than sitting and complaining and cribbing about what is not happening in your life that you wanted to do. So,
Okay, ma'am. Thank you.
and I think spiritual well-being is very important topic for all of you to discuss with yourselves and with your patients as well. Every patient will have some amount of spiritual distress going on in their life. It's not about only end of life care. I have to talk about spiritual distress and spiritual well-being to a patient. You have to talk about spiritual well-being in with all your patients. Ask them how are they seeing their life. Is there any uh, complaints that they have in the process of life that they are living in? right? So that is an important question that you should discuss with your patients at some point of time. If you are spending a lot of time with your patient, say for example 10 days, 20 days, or clinical visits, they're visiting you very often, I think this is a topic that you should discuss with them. If you first of all are able to discuss it with yourselves, I think you should do it with your clients as well.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thanks. Okay, now I think we can take few questions from the chat box as well.
Yes, ma'am. You can go.
Okay. Can acupuncture come under ahimsa method? Okay. So, see, if you think that by pricking a person you're causing pain and that's not ahimsa, I don't think so. I agree with that point, because here I'm thinking of what greater good can you bring in by practicing acupuncture, rather than thinking about just that amount of trivial, not even pain. In fact, it's just a prick many times that we feel. If you're choosing the right point and using the right method of pricking. So acupuncture is not ahimsa. It's not some violence that you're creating on. Okay. Okay. Yeah. It's not some violence or something that you're creating. You're bringing about by your treatment. I think you are in fact helping patient get rid of pain many a time. So acupuncture is definitely not ahimsa. Think about the greater benefits that you can bring, rather than thinking about just that amount of transient, very, very trivial pain that you're causing a patient, right? Okay. How to combine yoga and acupuncture, whether medication in accordance with 5 elements. Okay. So, see, if you understand acupuncture in traditional perspectives, it is very, very, very close to yogic principles also. So, if you're talking about, you know, how you can understand 5 elements is one thing, yin yang is another thing. It talks about prakriti purusha. Yoga also talks about prakriti purusha. So when you practice acupuncture, when you understand the principles behind how thoughts will, even in acupuncture, they very beautifully explain how thoughts can impact your health. How in fact these thoughts, the stresses that we have can cause liver chi stagnation, liver chi raising, liver fire, or how overthinking is very much equivalent to, spleen chi deficiency, because overthinking leads to spleen chi deficiency in terms of pathogenesis. Okay. So how you talk about stress in yoga, same way you can talk about your thoughts in acupuncture also. But when we come to health perspective, yoga is about balance, right? Yoga is about how you can remain balanced, how you can create that harmony within you and between you and the entire world. Acupuncture is also in the same terms. It also talks about balance in the nadis, balance of the energy, balance between the organs, balance between your mind and the organs. So it's very, very close by yoga and acupuncture. I think all traditional systems, I must say, it's not yoga or not just acupuncture. There's very beautiful correlation between Ayurveda, yoga, naturopathy, Ayurveda, homeopathy. All of us, I think we emerge out of all similar principles explained in different methods. Okay. What is the role of naturopathy in cancer care? does it only confine to palliative care, or really we can do something else too? Okay. Finally, somebody is asking me a question in what I've been experienced in. Thank you. So in cancer care, the lot of things that you as a yoga and naturopathy doctor can do. Okay. You can, it's not meant, two questions on that which has come is it only during palliative care that you can do? No, not really. You can start right from prevention of cancer. Prevention is the first step where you can work on, and very important area that you should work on as yoga and naturopathy doctors. There are a lot of things that you deal with. Diabetes is one of the most common disease that we get as yoga and naturopathy doctors, and diabetes is one of the major risk factor for cancer. So can you do something about diabetes and prevent cancer ahead? Yes, that's one area. Pre-diagnostically, that is preventive aspect. Post-diagnosis, pre-treatment is when you work psychologically, build a lot of resilience in the patient to cope with the hardship that they might go through during the treatment phase. In cancer care, it's always best to work in integration rather than trying to work alone with just what naturopathic dietic principles can you bring in, what hydrotherapy treatments can you bring in, what yoga treatments can you bring in to improve the quality of life of a cancer patient. Say for example, a patient is going through side effects of chemotherapy induced nausea, vomiting. Can you introduce cold or neutral abdomen pack, neutral abdomen compress, along with deep breathing, breath awareness, pranayamas, relaxation techniques? In cancer care, it is very much like a customized approach. There's nothing that you can generalize. Outcome of the treatment, quality of death of the patient also. I think you can play a very, very major role in all of these. Do we have more questions?
Yes, ma'am. Diksha is having the question.
How can, sorry. Okay. How can one define vitality as, and how can one differentiate between immunity and vitality? Overthinking leads to what deficiency, as you said in pathology? Please elaborate. Okay. So because I've already spoken about acupuncture, let me tell you, overthinking is associated with uh, extracting energy out of the food that you have eaten. If your spleen chi is deficient, your digestion doesn't happen properly. Your overall, in terms of, you can get into things like IBS, hypothyroidism. We have seen a lot of people, spleen chi deficiency, hypothyroidism, diabetes, PCOD, varicose veins, IBS. So overthinking is one of the cause for spleen chi becoming deficient. And if spleen chi is deficient, then obviously stomach chi is not working properly in terms of earth elements, spleen and stomach work hand in hand. They cannot supply well for your lungs and large intestine because they are the next set of organs that come in 5-element theory, right? So overthinking, like I was talking to you about, it's spleen chi deficiency. Read about what all disorders comes under spleen chi deficiency. So we have next question: how can one define vitality, and how can one differentiate between immunity and vitality? Okay. See, vitality is about whether I as a person is ready to cope up with any sort of a ill health physically, any sort of a psychological trauma or disturbance that has caused me. Am I able to cope up with it? Do I have the resilience to get out of the trouble that I'm in? Is vitality. Okay. Many a times we talk vitality is health. What is health? Health is not only about, you functioning better. It's also about whether you are strong enough, you're capable enough to get rid of all the ill health that you have, or any sort of a uncomfortable situation that you encounter. Do you have the capacity? Are you resilient enough to get out of that situation, cope with that situation effectively? Is what I think vitality is all about. It's not only about what is usually taught to us in our college is about how healthy we are, right? It's also about how effective and resilient you are. Vitality is that. Immunity, should I really talk about immunity now that you've understood vitality? Immunity is something that will help you resist against any external pathogen. It's not only microorganisms, it could be any sort of an external stimuli that is harming you physically, mentally. Are you able to get rid of it? Is immunity, right? Immunity is usually to do with infections and certain things that causes chronic inflammations. But vitality is whether you have enough resilience to work on your immunity to get rid of the infection that you have. Say, for example, if I have tuberculosis, if I have a good immunity, very good. I can build upon my immunity in multiple ways. They can give me antibiotics. Even that's also a form of immune booster that I'm receiving. But am I resilient enough to allow my body to help in multiple perspectives to get rid of tuberculosis? Is what vitality is. So that's the main difference that I think is. If you have other opinions, you can please pitch in. There's another.
Good evening, ma'am.
Yeah.
Hello, good evening, ma'am.
Good evening. Please.
Yes, ma'am. My name is Cha. I am 4th year student. I'm from S. Vyasa University. So, ma'am, my question is, what's the immediate treatment we can give to an epilepsy patient if they are present with the seizures? I mean, what can we can give immediately to them? And do the seizures have any relation or
do these seizures have any relation
with our aura?
A relationship with aura is something that I really don't know about, so I don't want to bluff about it. If you ask me about what can you do immediately is, see, even in allopathy, there is no immediate relief. They only make sure, they wait until the seizure is sharp, they make sure that they don't bite their tongue, they turn the patient towards one side. I think those are the only quick measures that you can take and immediately shift them to, an emergency setting. In my knowledge, there's nothing more that we can do in immediate effect, apart from preventing them from biting their tongue. or causing any other trauma. They should not be hitting themselves to any sharp edges and things like that if they're falling off. So I think that's the main thing that you should we can do in terms of emergency epileptic attack, rather than give any effective
Any
intervention.
acupuncture points we can give?
I think
Acupuncture points?
there are some acupuncture points which I am not very well versed with, because I have not myself experienced giving acupuncture to any epileptic patient, especially during their epileptic attack. But I can get back to you on that. I can read about it and get back to you on that. Right now, I'm not able to recollect any points, acupuncture points for epilepsy during the attack.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Good evening, ma'am. Am I audible?
Good evening.
Myself, Shraddha. I'm from
Yes.
Government Nature Cure and Yoga Medical College. I'm 4th year student. My question is, how can yoga help in organic brain disorders like bipolar, Alzheimer's, schizophrenia?
Okay. So, see, in bipolar disorders, it could be in schizophrenia. These two disorders, I've seen them personally. There's some amount of unknown. There are multiple ways that you can help. First, very basic, you can help them get rid of anxiety that they have. Bipolar, especially anxiety, depression, both of it is there. So you are experts. I think we have definitely come in terms that we are experts in integrating well with needy people, like it could be a psychologist or a psychiatrist, and help wonderfully in anxiety and depression. I think we have enough number of papers that support this statement of mine. So in bipolar, you can effectively take care of how you can bring balance in them. It is a very long-term process for organic brain disorders. It's a very long-term process. You first of all should have a lot of resilience in patients to deal with them. If you are able to do it, then you can help them step by step, help them come in terms with what they are going through, educate them, make them accept that there are some certain things that are going on in them, and later on, with the help of medications. Of course, in schizophrenia, medications are necessary. So with medication, what yogic counseling can you do? What yoga practices can you give in terms of relaxing them, and in terms of yoga core? What does yoga talk about? Balance in all different planes, expectations, acceptance. In all of these planes, can you bring about a balance? There are a lot of papers also on effect of yoga on schizophrenia and bipolar disorders. Please do go through them. I think you should also talk to one of your if you're not from SVYASA, right? So, okay, if you were from SVYASA, there is one person I could talk to. But there are a lot of papers that you should definitely read in schizophrenia and yoga. In NIMHANS only, there are a lot of studies going on for schizophrenia and bipolar disorders. Alzheimer's also, it's a very tedious long-term process, but I think yogic intervention will add on to quality of life. I'm not sure of what major changes can you bring, because it's a degenerative disease. You can definitely slow down the process, but you can work in terms of improving the quality of life of the person with Alzheimer's.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Non-neoplastic polyps, and can we really help them at the level of their gene mutation, like in microsatellite stability? Okay, So non-neoplastic polyps, can you give me an example of it? Are you talking of what polyp are you talking about? Are you talking about? Give me an example of a non-neoplastic polyp.
Like inflammatory polyps and hyperplastic polyps.
See, one thing in very much confidence that I can tell you is that intervention of yoga and naturopathy will be helpful if you're talking about inflammatory polyps. Definitely, it will help you bringing down the inflammation. But to what rate and what stage the condition is? Is it very acute? Is it in a stage where it requires recent or very immediate action to be taken care? That's when probably you should not be pitching in. But otherwise, I think you can help in inflammatory polyps for sure, even if it is non-neoplastic. You can also work in genetic level, but again, it requires a lot of patience. It is a long-term process. It's not very easy. It's not that I do yoga for 1 month and then everything settles, or if I follow naturopathy for 1 month and everything settles. No, but it's definitely a start. Okay, so if you're talking about complete cure, I cannot guarantee it, nor can anybody guarantee complete cure in any field of medicine for any disease. It's only what best you can do from your end. Cure depends. What is the last principle of nature cure? Can you recollect the last principle of nature cure? How many principles are there? What is the last one? The last principle talks about it is all dependent on the patient's ability to cope up with the disease, right? How much ever you do, if your patient is resilient enough to cope up with the disease that they have, then you can think about cure. But until then, cure is always a questionable factor. I myself don't even in my clinical practice, I do not promise cure to any disease, be it PCOD, be it thyroid issues, be it migraine, whatever. I do not promise cure from my end. Cure has multiple things that are dependent on it. So even for non-neoplastic diseases, you can definitely do a lot of things in bringing down the inflammatory markers, in psychologically working on the patient. You can do a lot of things that way. But if you're talking about cure, then I really cannot guarantee you that. Yeah, have I answered your question? Seeing the future scope of BMIS, which subject do we have to choose for pursuing further degree? Is it good to continue PG course immediately after BNYS, or is it good to work as practitioner for some years for better learning and experience and later pursue PG? Okay, so I think every BNY student in their final year internship have this question of whether or not I should pursue my PG or enter into a clinical practice. That completely depends on your priority. For me, my priority was clinical practice. I wanted to understand how it is to work as a doctor, understand how it is to deal with patients, rather than at that point of time, I was very sure that I'm not going to pursue anything. I'm not going to do MD for sure. at that point of time. But I'm not against MD courses. I'm not against you doing your masters in any way. But you should prioritize on what is it that you want. Do you want to academically orient your career, or do you want to clinically orient your career? Do you want to orient your career towards research? What is it that you are inclined towards? Decides your career. It does not depend on what answer I give. I can say from my personal practice, I can say get into clinicals, but there are a lot of people who have pursued masters and are doing great, right? So if you ask me, please give it a very serious thought. Take few days to sit and decide on what do you want to see. How do you want to see yourselves after 10 years? Do you want to see yourselves as a working clinician? Do you want to see yourselves as teaching students? Do you want to see yourselves as a scientist? Do you want to see yourselves as an administrator in one of the naturopathy colleges? So please see what best you what priority you have, and then decide on your career. Please don't decide on what I have to say. I can say 100 things. I can say get into spa. Maybe you're not interested in it, right? So pursuing PG is not a bad idea. Pursuing your masters is not a bad idea, as far as you're doing a good job of it. If you're doing it only for the sake of 2 letters next to BNYS, then I would not suggest you to do it. But if you're really going to bring in some quality to your field, to the entire family of naturopathy, then you should pursue. If you're academically oriented, you should pursue your PG for sure, and do a good job out of it, not just do it for the sake of doing it. How to increase immunity?
Hello.
How to increase immunity? Who wants to answer this question? See, again, I would personally think that you should not go in terms of reductionist approach, talking only about immunity. You should talk about your vitality as a whole, proper lifestyle. We cannot, in this situation, in this current generation, in this current society, maybe we cannot promise a perfect 100% good lifestyle, right? But what best can you do in terms of your lifestyle in whatever is available, whatever is in your control? What best lifestyle can you inculcate for yourselves? Helps improving your vitality and therefore your immunity. Okay, don't go with reductionist approach. There are a lot of people who say drinking carrot juice every day improves immunity, drinking lemon honey juice improves immunity. No, I do 100 shit things and I drink carrot juice every day, makes no difference. Okay, so you as a naturopathy yoga doctor, you should think holistically, work holistically, give suggestions that way, talk to your patients, see your patients with that perspective, rather than sitting and thinking of what diseases, what to do, okay, somebody has some sort of an infection, I only think of improving the immunity and not think of doing anything else in terms of hygiene, prevention, secondary preventions. No, don't go with reductionist approach. I think your college has taught you enough about how to improve immunity. I'm not going to elaborate more on this. I would only say following correct principles of what naturopathy and yoga has given you will work wonders in terms of improving your immunity and vitality as well.
Hello, ma'am.
Yes.
My name is Komal Dubal, Maharishi fourth year student, Maharishi Patanjali Institute of Yoga and Naturopathy, Jamnagar. I want to ask, in modern approach, diet prescribed on calorie basis.
in naturopathy, which things we need to consider in our diet, or what are the bases of it?
See, naturopathic diet usually doesn't talk about calories. It talks about the nutritive value. It talks about the quality of the food. I can take carbohydrates in any way. Can I take, if you are telling a patient that you should consume 100 grams of, I'm giving you an arbitrary number. If you're telling a patient that you should say 100 grams of something, or say if you're asking a patient to consume 10 grams of carbohydrates every day, I can take that 10 gram in terms of sugar also. I can take that in terms in form of fruits. I can take that in form of some vegetables. So you should take the basis, or you should base your dietetic or nutritional approach in terms of quality, in terms of those three questions. I really can vouch for what to eat, when to eat, how to eat. Those three questions that comes in nutrition, I think you should answer them. You should talk in that perspective rather than talk in terms of calories. Calories don't work all the time.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. So we'll conclude the session. There is
Yeah.
enough of questions you have answered, and it have taken 1.5 years.
I think I've I've been of some use, because I don't know. I to definitely appreciate the questions that came by. I had not expected any of these questions. I was probably expecting questions on. There were two questions on cancer care, but I was definitely expecting more questions on cancer care and yoga and integration, and definitely not on a lot of other topics that you have asked questions on. I think I hope I have really given some insight to it.
It
And
covers the most perspective, and we are looking forward that we can touch this part of cancer and yogic approach in the coming sessions with you, whenever the
it
time
definitely,
is there.
I'll be happy about.
And or like a session, you will be explaining about what it is exactly and how we should learn
Definitely.
the perspective. So this is the wonderful session as a student also, and as a, like, you can say anything like organizer or a as a student. So I hope you will connect with us with this wonderful session. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thanks for the opportunity. And I should definitely thank Apar
Dr.
Bhaiya
Apar,
again
yes.
for suggesting my name to you guys. And all of you guys who have participated, I think it was nice discussing with you. I revisited my college days, questions that I had during my internship and post that. It was a very good discussion. Very good discussion with all of you. I hope I was of some use. Thank you.
It's of good use for all of us. Thank you. Thank you everyone to join this session. Thank you.